They weren't sophisticated gangsters in tailored suits smoking cigarettes in slow motion. They were street thugs who beat people for pocket change and died young in the gutter. But you wouldn't know that from watching television. The real Peaky Blinders existed for roughly 30 years in Birmingham, England. This is what really happened, and it's far uglier than you've been told. Act 1. The Making of Monsters. Summer Street, Birmingham, 1895. Thomas Mucklow is 17 years old when he watches his first street beating. 3 men surround a shopkeeper outside a tobacconist on Summer Street. The shopkeeper, a thin man named George Davies, clutches his till receipts in shaking hands. He's explaining desperately that he doesn't have the money, not this week. Business is slow. His wife is sick. Please, just one more week. The largest of the 3 men doesn't say anything. He just steps forward and hits Davies in the face with a belt buckle. Davies goes down hard. Blood streams from his nose. He tries to curl into a ball, but the men kick him. Ribs, kidneys, face. The beating lasts maybe 30 seconds. When they stop, Davies is unconscious in the street, and the men are rifling through his pockets. They take 4 shillings and 6pence, less than a laborer makes in a day. Thomas watches from across the street. He's supposed to be horrified. His mother raised him Church of England, taught him right from wrong, but what he feels isn't horror, it's envy. Those men have power. They take what they want. Nobody stops them. And in Birmingham's slums in 1895, power is the only currency that matters. 2 years later, Thomas Mucklow will be leading his own gang. 10 years later, newspapers will be calling them the Peaky Blinders, and mothers will use their name to frighten children into obedience. But right now, he's just a teenager watching men commit violence for pocket change and thinking, I could do that. This is where it starts. Not with grand ambitions or family legacy, with poverty, desperation, and the realization that fear is profitable. To understand the Peaky Blinders, you have to understand Birmingham in the 1890s. It's a city choking on its own growth. The Industrial Revolution has transformed Birmingham from a market town into a manufacturing powerhouse. Factories belch smoke day and night. The metal trades employ thousands, gun makers, nail makers, jewelers, brass workers. The city produces half the world's metal goods. The wealth is staggering, the inequality is worse. In the wealthy suburbs, Edgbaston, Moseley, factory owners build grand homes with servants and gardens. In the slums, Cheapside, Bordsley, Small Heath, workers live 10 to a room in back-to-back houses with no running water and shared toilets that empty into open cesspits. Child mortality in the slums is 50%. 50%. Half of all children born in these neighborhoods die before their 5th birthday from disease, malnutrition, or accidents in the factories where they work for pennies. The streets are narrow, dark, and dangerous. Gas lamps provide minimal light. Police rarely patrol after dark. They know better. The pubs are filled with men drinking away wages while their families starve. Violence is routine. Murder is common. This is the world that creates the Peaky Blinders. Not some romantic gangster mythology, but grinding poverty and the brutal calculus of survival. If you're born in Small Heath in 1880, you have limited options. Work in a factory for 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, for wages that barely cover rent. Join the army and likely die in some colonial war. Starve, or take what you need from people weaker than you. The Peaky Blinders choose option 4. Nobody knows for certain where the name comes from. The popular myth, the one repeated in the TV show, is that they sewed razor blades into their flat caps and used them as weapons, blinding their enemies. It makes for great television. There's just one problem. It's almost certainly false. Disposable razor blades weren't widely available in England until after 1900, and even then they were expensive, too expensive for street thugs to waste by sewing them into caps. The few contemporary accounts that mention the gang's weapons talk about belt buckles, knives, brass knuckles, and broken bottles. Never razors in caps. The more likely explanation is linguistic. Peaky referred to the peak of their flat caps, which they wore pulled low over their eyes. Blinders possibly came from blinding, Birmingham slang meaning something fashionable or impressive. So, Peaky Blinders essentially meant well-dressed fellows with peaked caps. It's less dramatic than razor cap assassins, but it fits the reality. These were young men trying to look tough and fashionable in a world that offered them neither dignity nor opportunity. The caps themselves were standard working-class wear, flat wool caps with a small peak called newsboy caps or baker boy caps. Every working man in Birmingham wore one. The gang didn't invent them or weaponize them, they just wore them while committing crimes. But the myth stuck. If you're learning something new about the real history behind the myth, like this video and subscribe for more untold stories. The Peaky Blinders weren't masterminds. They were street thugs running protection rackets. Their primary business was simple extortion. They'd approach shopkeepers, bookmakers, pub owners, and market vendors with a straightforward proposal. Pay us, or we'll destroy your business and probably hurt you in the process. Most people paid. The going rate was typically a few shillings per week, not much, but multiply that by dozens of businesses and you have a steady income. More importantly, you have power. People fear you. Step aside when you walk down the street, give you drinks on the house, treat you with the respect that poverty and class usually deny. When someone refused to pay, the gang made examples. They'd smash shop windows, steal inventory, beat the owner in front of his family. Sometimes they'd target the owner's children, not killing them but scaring them, showing that nowhere was safe. Violence was their product. Fear was their currency. They also ran illegal betting operations. Horse racing was hugely popular, and while betting itself was legal, running unauthorized betting shops was not. The Peaky Blinders operated pitch and toss games and illegal bookmaking operations, taking cuts from bets and using violence to eliminate competition. Street robbery was common too. They'd target well-dressed visitors to Birmingham or workers on payday. Tommy Shelby doesn't exist. He's a fictional character created for television. The real Peaky Blinders had leaders, but their names are far less memorable and their personalities far less charismatic. Thomas Mucklow was mentioned in several court cases from the 1890s as a leader of the Peaky Gang. He was arrested multiple times for assault and theft. Court records describe him as a laborer, uneducated, with a long history of violence. He died young, likely in his 30s, in circumstances that aren't well documented. No grand death scene. He just disappeared from records, probably killed in a street fight or dead from disease. Harry Fowler was another early leader, known for organizing the protection rackets in Small Heath. He was eventually sent to prison for beating a rival gang member nearly to death with a belt buckle. He served 3 years hard labor and emerged broken, his health ruined, his gang fractured. He died in poverty in 1910. These weren't strategic geniuses. They were violent men who were slightly better at organizing violence than their peers. Act 2. The Beginning of the End. August 1914. The war comes. When Britain declares war on Germany, everything changes. Suddenly, violent young men have a sanctioned outlet for their aggression. The army is recruiting aggressively, offering steady pay, meals, and the promise of adventure. For young men in Birmingham's slums, it's the best opportunity they've ever had. Thousands enlist, including many Peaky Blinders. They don't join out of patriotism. Most couldn't point to Belgium on a map. They join because the alternative is the factory or the streets, and the army pays better than either. Thomas Mucklow's younger brother John enlists in August 1914 with the Royal Warwickshire Regiment. He's 19 years old, illiterate, and has been arrested twice for assault. The army doesn't care. They need bodies. John Mucklow dies at the Battle of Loos in September 1915. He's hit by German machine gun fire while going over the top. He bleeds out in a shell crater, screaming for his mother, and dies alone in the mud. He's one of millions, one tiny statistic in the catastrophe. Back in Birmingham, the gang is hemorrhaging members. Some join the army. Others take high-paying factory jobs making weapons and ammunition. The war effort needs metal workers desperately, and suddenly men who could barely afford food are making decent wages. The streets empty out. The gang's territory shrinks. The old leaders are dead, in prison, or gone to war. The Peaky Blinders, as an organized force, are dissolving. When the war ends and soldiers come home, they're different. They've seen industrial slaughter. They've watched friends die in unspeakable ways. They've lived in trenches filled with rats, disease, and corpses. Coming back to petty street crime seems absurd. Some try to restart the old rackets, but the energy isn't there. The leaders who survived the war have no appetite for street fighting anymore. They've seen real violence. Belt-buckle beatings seem trivial after the Somme. The younger generation, the teenagers who would have joined the gang in 1910, are different too. Some have jobs now. The war economy has created opportunities that didn't exist before. Others have joined new gangs with new methods. By 1920, the Peaky Blinders as a distinct entity are essentially finished. Some members continue using the name, but it's nostalgia more than reality. The Birmingham underworld has moved on. There's one final significant incident involving the Peaky Blinders name. August 30th, 1920, a racetrack outside Birmingham. Illegal betting is happening, as always. A young man named George West, claiming to be a Peaky Blinder, gets into an argument with several bookmakers over unpaid debts. The argument escalates. West pulls a knife. He stabs one bookmaker in the shoulder, another in the arm. It's messy, panicked violence, nothing professional about it. Police arrest West within an hour. He's tried, convicted, and sentenced to 5 years. During the trial, newspapers make a big deal about him being a Peaky Blinder, reviving the name in headlines. But the testimony reveals the truth. West is just a small-time thug using an old gang name to seem more dangerous than he is. The real Peaky Blinders are gone. What remains is mythology. Act 3. The legend replaces the truth. What happened to them? The real members of the Peaky Blinders had inglorious ends. Most died young from violence, disease, or accidents. Birmingham's slums were lethal even without gang warfare. Typhoid, tuberculosis, and simple injuries that turned septic killed thousands every year. Those who survived long enough typically ended up in one of 3 places: prison, the factories, or the streets, homeless, alcoholic, forgotten. None became wealthy, none became powerful, none escaped the class they were born into. The TV show would have you believe otherwise. It portrays Tommy Shelby building a criminal empire, becoming a member of parliament, rubbing shoulders with aristocrats. It's a fantasy, not just historically inaccurate, but fundamentally dishonest about class mobility in early 20th century Britain. Working-class criminals didn't become legitimate businessmen. They died in the gutter or rotted in prison. The mythology began almost immediately. By the 1920s, newspapers were running nostalgic pieces about the Peaky Blinders. as colorful rogues from a bygone era. The violence was downplayed, the poverty was romanticized. They became folk heroes, working-class lads who fought back against authority. This is historically illiterate. The Peaky Blinders mostly victimized other working-class people. They didn't fight authority, they exploited vulnerability. But mythology doesn't care about facts. By the 1960s, there were books celebrating the gang. By the 1980s, academic papers analyzing them as a social phenomenon. By 2013, a television show that transformed them into something unrecognizable. Peaky Blinders, the TV show, is excellent television. The cinematography is gorgeous, the acting is superb. Cillian Murphy is captivating as Tommy Shelby. It's also almost complete fiction. The real gang didn't control international crime, manipulate British politics, fight the mafia or the IRA, have any member become an MP, wear expensive three-piece suits, plan elaborate heists, or have sophisticated criminal strategies. They wore flat caps because that's what poor people wore. They committed small-time crimes because that's all they were capable of. They died young because violence and poverty kill young. Now that you know the truth behind the myth, share this video with someone else who's been fooled by the television story. History matters. What did the Peaky Blinders actually leave behind? A few dozen criminal records, some newspaper articles, a lot of pain for the families of their victims, and a name that would eventually sell millions of television subscriptions a century later. Their actual impact on Birmingham's history was minimal. They were one gang among many in a city full of crime. They didn't change anything. They didn't challenge anything. They just hurt people for money until they died or disappeared. But we want to believe the myth. We want Tommy Shelby, brilliant, damaged, charismatic, rising from poverty to power through intelligence and will. We want the beautiful cinematography and the modern soundtrack and the sense that working-class criminals could beat the system. The truth is uglier. They couldn't and didn't. The system crushed them, as it was designed to do. The real Peaky Blinders were neither heroes nor masterminds. They were desperate men making desperate choices in a desperate time. Some of their violence was understandable. When society offers you nothing, taking something by force has its own logic. But understandable isn't the same as admirable. They hurt people. They died young. They were forgotten until television resurrected them as something they never were. Birmingham, 1925. An old man sits on a bench in Garrison Lane. He's maybe 50, but he looks 70. His hands shake. His breathing is labored. Too many years breathing metal dust in the factories. Too many beatings that broke ribs that never healed right. His name is Thomas Mucklow, and once upon a time, young men feared him. Now, nobody recognizes him. The teenagers walking past don't know what a Peaky Blinder was. The businesses he once extorted have changed hands. The rivals he fought are dead or disappeared. The streets where he once held power have moved on. He has nothing. No money, no family that acknowledges him, no legacy except a criminal record and a body broken by violence. Sometimes tourists ask him about the old days. They've read newspaper articles about the famous Birmingham gangs. They want colorful stories about razor blades and daring robberies. He tells them what they want to hear. He lies. He makes it sound romantic, exciting, meaningful. The truth, that he was a thug who hurt poor people for pocket change, that his violence accomplished nothing, that his life was wasted on brutality that changed nothing, that's too bleak. Nobody wants that story. So he lies, and they believe him, and the myth grows. Thomas Mucklow dies in 1926 in a charity hospital. The cause of death is listed as chronic bronchitis and malnutrition. Nobody comes to his funeral. He's buried in an unmarked grave in a pauper's section of Warstone Lane Cemetery. The newspapers don't report his death. There's no obituary. He just stops existing, and the world doesn't notice. But the name lives on. Peaky Blinders enters the cultural consciousness. Books mention them, historians study them. Eventually, television transforms them into legends. The real men, violent, desperate, ultimately pathetic, are forgotten. The myth, glamorous, powerful, righteous, takes their place. And somewhere, in an unmarked grave in Birmingham, Thomas Mucklow's bones rest next to hundreds of other forgotten poor, and nobody remembers that he was real. That's the actual story of the Peaky Blinders. Not a legend, a warning. Not heroes, victims who created more victims. Not a thrilling tale of criminal genius. A depressing story of how poverty, violence, and lack of opportunity create cycles that crush everyone caught in them. The TV show is excellent entertainment, but this grinding, ugly, forgotten reality, this was the truth. Discover more forgotten histories and untold truths. Subscribe now and never miss the real stories behind the myths that captivate us all.